Hello there. I think this is probably my first time talking to camera in this vlog, so hello, welcome. I do apologize if you can hear a lawnmower in the background, but as the title of the video might suggest, this is a summer reading vlog, and in it we are likely to experience the sounds of summer, shall we say. So it certainly started to feel like summer where I am in the mid-Atlantic region of the US. Today and the past couple days are in the mid to high 90s, but I figured that I would kick this summer reading vlog off by telling you what book I am reading, or at least one of the books that I'm currently reading, and that is my garden book by Jamaica Kincaid. This is my first Kincaid, and I wanted to start with this one namely because of the subject matter. This is Kincaid's, you could say, personal reflections on her own garden, her own gardening journey, and I myself am currently in the midst of tending to and putting together a summer vegetable garden, which you will definitely see featured in this vlog. So I felt like it was an apt choice to pair with a summer reading vlog. There are a few other books that you might see me flitting in and out of, but I would like the main focus of this vlog to be my garden book by Jamaica Kincaid. Today's Tuesday, and I actually have taken off from work for the past couple of days. This past Monday, today, and tomorrow I have off from work, which has been really nice so far. It has been definitely a much needed sort of break and breathing room to get back into my own creative projects. I've been definitely doing a lot of YouTube prep work, behind the scenes stuff for stuff that I'm really excited to put out in the coming weeks, as well as hopefully getting to work on some of my own creative writing projects. But that will definitely be, I guess, discussed and featured in this vlog as well. Yeah, my goal for the next couple days is to relax, catch up on some of my own creative projects and work, and get back into the swing of things, because I definitely feel like I have not had the time to devote to things like YouTube and writing in the way that I would really like to. So I treated myself to a couple days off in order to do so. But my goal for this afternoon is to film 2 videos and hopefully finish editing one so that it can go up tomorrow, hopefully. Tomorrow as in Wednesday, June 19th, which will be prior to your watching this. Filming, timelines, editing, all different things. When I tell you that I live by calendars and to-do lists, I definitely mean it. When it comes to my own creative projects. That'll be it for this first little check-in. I will check in probably later today. Hello, it is now Saturday morning. I'm coming to you with an attempt at taming this bedhead. It's somewhat worked, but for the most part hasn't. Wanted to check in and say hello. It is around, let's see, 10 a.m. and we're in the middle of a heat wave at the moment. I feel like most folks in the US are. Yeah, it was about 85 degrees by 7:30 this morning, so it's going to be a rough one today. I'd hoped to get some gardening done this weekend, but I think I'll probably have to lower my expectations on that just due to the nature of the heat outside. At the moment, I'm currently attempting to work on putting together my Budapest travel vlog to put out hopefully today or tomorrow. Fingers crossed. We'll see if that happens. It's a project that I have been, I guess, grappling with for the past couple of weeks since getting back. And I think part of the reason why it's taken me longer than I expected to, really sink my teeth into putting together a video is it just feels a little bit overwhelming, just the amount of footage that I have, but also personally, this is something that feels really important to me. This vlog, this trip was really important. The city itself is a really important place for me. So I think all of that sort of piled on top of itself, and I guess I let it get to me, or led to me feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and also putting a decent amount of pressure on myself to make it quote-unquote perfect, which is a tendency that I have. But I'm going to take a stab at it fully this morning. I'm actually going to go set up in my work from home area so I can have 2 screens, because I think that will be helpful. But I think actually before I go and set up and dig on into this project. I think I'm actually gonna get myself ready. I might put on a little bit of makeup. I think having that sort of mentality of being ready for the day and feeling like I haven't just rolled out of bed, which I have, I think will hopefully bring my mind to a little bit more of a present and focused state. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And now, the pièce de résistance, I have a new red lipstick that I would like to try out today. This is a new one that I got from, it's a Korean brand, I believe, called Romand. I really like some of their lip products, and this is their sort of like matte blotted lip. So I'm gonna try this on. Not put my glasses back on yet, but I really like that. The color is very bright, but the impact is a bit softer and more blurred, which I'm enjoying. There we go, with the glasses. And with that, I feel a little bit, or a lot of it, more put together and ready to face the day. So I suppose it's time I should crack on into that project, shall I? Hey there, it is now 11 p.m. or so. I've been working on the Budapest vlog in some form or fashion for most of today, and I feel like towards the end of today I finally started to make some headway as far as figuring out sort of how I wanted the voiceover to go, and then actually figuring out how to record the voiceover. In the past I've just used my plug-in headphones to record audio for voiceovers, but in the past I haven't been super pleased with the audio quality that it provides. So I was rummaging around trying to figure out how to nicely record the voiceover for this vlog. It took me a couple tries in a few different situations. In the end, I realized that my partner, who is also a musician, had left one of his larger recording microphone setups with me, so I pulled that out, hooked it up to my computer, and that seems to be working so far, so thank goodness. Yeah, I'd hoped to have the Budapest vlog out tomorrow on June 22nd, but at this point I don't think that's gonna happen, and I am trying to be okay with that. I think setting up creative goals and timelines I find is really helpful for me in actually getting stuff done. But on the other hand, I don't want to so closely hold myself to those timelines and goals that I burn myself out. Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at the moment. I'm definitely feeling a lot better about how the vlog overall is looking. There are definitely moments where I sort of had the, call it the Chicken Little mindset of the sky is falling, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be awful. But as I continued to work on it and more small pieces started to come together and make a larger thing that was looking pretty decent, or at least something that I would feel comfortable putting out into the world. So yeah, making things can be uncomfortable a lot of the time, and I think part of being a creative is learning to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and being uncomfortable while creating something. So that has definitely been where I've been at for most of today. But like I said, I think I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to leave my kind of ridiculous audio setup set up so I can come back to it in the morning. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it a night here and come back fresh when I've had some sleep. Hello there, it feels like it's been a bit since I have done a check-in, and honestly I feel like I've kind of been avoiding a reading check-in of this book, my garden book by Jamaica Kincaid, because I started reading it and I realized I really was not getting along with it, and so I decided to DNF it. And I'll tell you why. The style of Kincaid's writing itself is stream of consciousness. It is very much a scattered, all over the place, sometimes difficult to follow sort of mental tirade. I had heard prior to getting into this book that Kincaid, one, wrote in stream of consciousness, but two, unlike some other stream of consciousness writers that I've read and enjoyed, say Virginia Woolf, say Toni Morrison, she doesn't edit her work, doesn't believe in editing her work. And I think for me it definitely showed in this book, and I didn't really find that enjoyable. I think largely in part because the tone of this narration is very, I don't want to say negative, but I guess negative, angsty, futzing. Kincaid's approach to gardening is very different from my own. I only got 30 pages or so into this book, but from what I did read, her mindset very much when approaching a garden is kind of this large problem to solve and kind of angsting over or complaining about or kind of nitpicking all of these different things that are just part of nature. Seeing the garden as a problem to be solved in that she has sort of a vision in her head and she's not sure how to enact it, but she gets frustrated at nature for not complying to her own, I guess, internal vision of what a garden or what her garden is supposed to look like. And I think that was sort of the key difference, the key aspect of this book that made me decide to put it down and say I'm not gonna drag myself through this, which is unfortunate because I've been really looking forward to reading Jamaica Kincaid for quite a while now. I think I will hold out for her fiction work. I want to see what she can do with fiction as opposed to this being sort of a personal memoir type of situation. I'm not going to buy any more of her books, even though this was a used copy, but I will potentially in the future consider getting one of her fiction books out from the library and see how I find that as opposed to this. But that is the update on my garden book. Anticlimactic, I guess, and I think that's in part why I put off doing this update, because I was kind of grappling with the fact that I wasn't enjoying this as I was reading it, and I had sort of started this vlog and wanted to theme this vlog around reading this book and gardening. So didn't turn out as planned, but that's okay. I will tell you about the books that I have been reading recently, one that I finished yesterday. So after I'd made the decision to put down Kincaid's book, I was really kind of in the mood to pick up something that was kind of, I guess, entertaining, lighthearted, something to kind of get my reading mojo back, if you will. A friend had recently mentioned reading Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is a new release of his, I believe, and I've never read any Brandon Sanderson. I've heard a lot of hype around him over the years. I haven't dipped my toe into the fantasy worlds of Brandon Sanderson, but I think this time around things sort of fell into place in a very easy way, and my library had just added to their audiobook offering the audiobook of Tress and the Emerald Sea, so I decided to take it out and one, try out Brandon Sanderson because I've been wanting to, and not having to commit to a full, huge, lengthy tome book series, and just see what I thought, because it is a standalone. And so I started listening to the audiobook, and it took me a little bit to, I think, get into the story, but once I was in, I was definitely in, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up finishing it last night on my way home from work, and it was kind of just the thing that I needed at the time. It's a fantasy story. It has a very whimsical vibe to it. We're following our main character Tress, who grows up on this very isolated island. The world and it's not a magic system, but what we would consider to be supernatural interaction with the environment, I suppose, was really interesting. The world where the story is set doesn't have seas of water. It has seas of spores that, when interacting with things like water, have very interesting and often dangerous reactions. Tress grew up on an island on the Emerald Sea, which, when that interacts with water or moisture of any kind, it explodes into vines. So Tress is growing up on this small isolated island where no one is allowed to leave. She falls in love with a childhood friend. His father finds out, is very displeased, and sends the son away to go find a bride elsewhere. The childhood friend, love interest, his name is Charlie. Charlie's dad is the Duke of the island, therefore he can send his son away from the island, whereas everyone else is supposed to stay there. And so that is the catalyst that causes Tress to sneak off of the island to go and find him and rescue him after hearing he's been captured and ransomed by the sorceress that lives on the Midnight Sea. And it's a I would say overall it's a heartwarming story. There's definitely a lot of found family, chosen family in this story. There are definite Pirates of the Caribbean vibes, I will say, and I think I definitely want to discuss it more in an upcoming reading wrap-up, so I will sort of not get into too many details at the moment, but safe to say I really enjoyed it. It's really kind of a story that I needed to get me back in the groove with my own reading. I felt a little bit slumpy recently, I suppose, with some of my reading, and I think I just needed a story that I could just kind of sit back and sink into and just enjoy, and that definitely did that for me. I am now listening to the audiobook of The Beginning Place by Ursela K. Guin, and really enjoying it. I think so far it is exemplifying Le Guin's lyricism with her writing, her sort of philosophical nature when it comes to her stories, whether they be sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction. She is so good and very often employs character study, which I definitely feel like is happening in this story. I should tell you a little bit about the story, I guess. So far, I think, yes, it is a dual narrative because I just met the other narrator, but we start off with a narrator who is a 20-year-old man who is living with his single mother. They have recently moved to the suburbs of a town. He's started working as a grocery store clerk, and from the beginning you sort of see him walking through life in this kind of haze, very much shrinking himself down to a point where he doesn't cause a fuss with things in his life, his job, his routine, but mainly his mother. His mother, I'm not gonna try and diagnose her with anything, but there is very much an anxious, neurotic sort of control element from his mother. She wound like a tight wire, and you can see how Hugh really just tries to make himself as compliant as possible. There's a moment at the beginning of the book where his subconscious kind of starts to reel against that, and he ends up going out on his own at night, leaving the house while his mother is out, which is something he wouldn't normally do. He goes just sort of running aimlessly, and he happens across this sort of wooded, gladed area that he finds a stream, falls in love with a stream, and starts to repeatedly come back, but he realizes that time is a little bit different in this area that he's found and fallen in love with. Time moves differently there. It moves a lot slower. He started to live this double life where he gets up, goes to work, sees his mother, comes home, but also he's going and camping out by this stream and just sort of unfurling himself and starting to recognize his own needs, his own wants, his own desires in life in the space that he feels like he can completely be himself without having to sort of suppress any part of himself out of fear of brushing up against his mother's sort of sharp edges. And I'm really enjoying it so far. But yeah, that is my reading checkup for the moment. I'm going to cut it off here for now because I have to go back to work. I'm working from home today, thankfully. And yeah, I will talk to you at some point again. On Saturday, I made my way downtown to meet up with some friends at the National Gallery to check out the Woven Histories exhibit that was being shown in the East Building. I was delighted to see works from a number of artists who I'd studied in previous art history and studio art classes. Artists like the Dadaist collager Henna Hook, constructivist textile artist Lyubov Popova, and the Soviet painter and graphic designer Alexander Rodchenko. The exhibit itself touched on how textiles in the modern age have been largely marginalized from the regard of the art world and seen as a minor quote-unquote woman's work or domestic labor, instead of an age-old art form that in the 20th century and beyond has been closely linked with the tides of social change. It was also wonderful getting to see a number of folks who had brought a knitting or crochet project to the exhibit and were quietly working on it while taking in the art. When I walked into the basketry section of this exhibit, I was stopped dead in my tracks by the 3 Ruth Asawa pieces that were displayed hanging in the middle of the room. I very nearly gasped out loud when I read that she had hand-woven these shapes out of steel, brass, and iron wires. Hello again. I figure it is probably a good time for me to wrap up my current reading thoughts on The Beginning Place, wrap up my thoughts for this vlog as well. Since last checking in, I have finished listening to the audiobook of The Beginning Place, and overall I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the audiobook narrator in particular. His voice very much reminded me of older grandfatherly figure sitting by a fire in a rocking chair reading a story to his grandchildren, which was really delightful. So far what I'm finding in the books that I have read by Ursela K. Guin is throughout all of them there is this subtle and sometimes not as subtle underlying tone of philosophical pondering, of considering aspects of the human condition. There's definitely a sense of larger themes at play, larger themes being examined in her work. So far I've not found her works to be heavily plot-driven or even sometimes character-driven. There is this sort of navel-gazing character analysis, character study element to her work, which I really enjoy. I'm gonna guess it's not necessarily gonna be for everyone if you're looking for sort of fast-paced, entertaining sci-fi, fantasy, or historical fiction book. But personally, it's something that I love about her work. And I found with The Beginning Place, so backtracking to where I left off in telling you about it, I had just been introduced to the other main narrator, Irina. When we meet Irina in the story, she has already encountered and had a long history with the Twilight world that Hugh has stumbled across. And initially when she realizes that he's discovered it as well, she becomes very hostile and wants to persuade him not to come back. But as the story unfolds, they are forced to team up and work together and go on this quest into the depths of this Twilight world and face off against a monster that has been terrorizing the people that live there. I will say I really enthusiastically, deeply enjoyed the first, I would say, 2/3 of this book. It definitely was really resonating with me. It was really engrossing in the sort of delicate and nuanced way that Le Guin does character study for both Irina and Hugh. Going into the story, definitely stuck in their own way in their current life, in their current life setting. They're both sort of in that in-between space of young adult and adult, of moving away from childhood environments and forging their own paths. Brief side note, if you are someone that prefers to look up content warnings, I would recommend looking up content warnings for this book when it comes to aspects of the story that relate to both Hugh and Irina's childhoods. The final third of this book, where they embark on this journey to the inner parts of this Twilight world to face off against this unknown creature, the story becomes much more allegorical, much more thematic, and I'm not going to say that I didn't enjoy it. To me, it sort of felt like the cadence and the level of character study that was happening, or character growth and development, I should say, for our two main characters, kind of tapers off a little bit, and Le Guin starts to lean a little bit more into the allegorical, the, shall we say, broad brushstrokes that she's sort of pulling together in this story. And I started to miss that subtle, nuanced kind of storytelling that I was really enjoying for the first 2/3 of this book. I also will say, it says this in the description, so I don't consider this to be a spoiler, but there is an element of romance in this story, and this could just be how I prefer romances in general, but the romance in this story does feel a little bit, or a lot of it, rushed at the end. It sort of all comes together in the span of a couple paragraphs. Yeah, I kind of wish that it had been sort of drawn out a little bit more over the course of the story, built into the character development of the characters. I mean, it is built into the character development of the characters, but to me, it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere because Irina and Hugh kind of butt heads quite a bit in the initial meeting that they have, and then in subsequent several sections of the book where they are sort of interacting within the Twilight world. And it's not until they are sort of finished with their quest that it sort of all comes together and they realize that they love each other. I think that was sort of my, I don't want to say main gripe, but aspect that I wish had played out a little bit differently. It's definitely a slow-moving narrative. It is very contemplative. which I enjoy. And it is a rather short book. It is, I think, just over 200 pages in physical form. And part of me wishes that Le Guin had expanded just a little bit the last third of the book, maybe by say another like 50 pages even, and just given a little bit more time and space for that sort of final third of the character's progression, not just the romance, but some of the, I guess you could say, allegory for coming of age that we see in the final sort of third of the book. And I apologize if you can hear a helicopter flying overhead. But again, overall, I really enjoyed The Beginning Place. I have several other Le Guin audiobooks bookmarked from my library, so I will hopefully be checking out another one soon. But with that, I think I'm going to close out and wrap up this summer reading vlog. I hope you enjoyed it, even if it wasn't exactly what I had intended to make when I first set out. I didn't intend to DNF the Jamaica Kincaid book. I didn't intend to pick up any fantasy books, but I sort of fell into that craving, and it definitely brought me back to a place where I sort of have my reading mojo back, I will say. So let me know down in the comments what you've been reading so far this summer. Have you been enjoying your reads? Have you read any of the books that I have read in this vlog? Have you read Jamaica Kincaid previously? What were your thoughts? Love to hear from you in the comments below. And with that, my friends, I will say goodbye to you and hope to see you again in the next video.